Hi, and welcome to another very exciting tutorial, a swiftui tutorial where we're going to build this simple application that might just solve one of the biggest problems you have with swiftui. If you want to build an application that can actually access the photo library or the camera of your users. So we're going to build that user interface here, of course, right after I've explained what this application does. And what it does is we can choose a profile image, display the ImagePicker controller, which actually is nothing fancy, but it is not available in swiftui because we're doing all of that in swiftui, and also access the photo libraries object and transfer that to our swiftui content view using some combine techniques. So all of that is going to happen in this video. If you just want to see how all of the ImagePicker controller stuff works without building the UI, just skip ahead a few minutes, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to not miss any future tutorials. And now let's begin. So let's bring up Xcode, and I've already created a new SwiftUI based project right here. It's just a single view application. I haven't changed anything here, just actually resumed my canvas display here so that we can see our first result right now. So the first thing that I'd like to do to actually create my user interface that you've seen is to bring in a simple image right here. So we are going to use the image, and we're going to use a system name right here. And to actually choose the right name for the graphic or the icon that you're actually trying to use, you can use the SF Symbols app that you can download for free on the developer websites from Apple. So just look for the SF Symbols app there. And I'm going to look for person right here, and we're going to deal with person fill, or the filled person icon right here. And then I'm going to hit edit and copy symbol, or copy the symbol name, which we could also do by pressing Command-Shift-C. And I'm going to just enter this string right here, and immediately we get our system image. And we still need to work with that maybe a little bit, so let's make some adjustments. First of all, I'd like this to be resizable so that we get it a little bit larger. This isn't what I'm looking for, and I just want this cropped shape, or I actually want to apply a mask. So let's first of all clip this shape with a circle. So this is what we're going to do first. Now, this still doesn't look too good, so let's maybe adjust the width and height so that we actually get the result that we're looking for. And I'm going to use the frame here to give that a width of 150 and a height of 150. And I don't need to specify an alignment here, and this looks already a little bit better. So if I now add a comment here before my clip shape, you can see that we have the full size avatar or person fill image right here. And once I clip that, we have this nice circular shape that we still need to distinguish a little bit more. So what I like to do is first of all add an overlay over this picture, and we're going to use a circle again for that. And then we should also adjust that a little bit, since we actually just want a stroke. I'm going to just use a stroke here, and I want to adjust the color a little bit. That's a little black, so let's go with color and a gray color. And I maybe also want to adjust the line width a little bit. Let's maybe go with 4. And this already looks a little bit better, but now that our stroke, or the border line around our person, is gray, let's maybe also adjust the color of our person.fill image. And therefore, I'm just going to use the foreground color here in line 17, and I'm going to specify the same gray color that we've just used. Now, this looks definitely a lot better. Now, what we also need now is the button to actually trigger our image picker, and I'm going to add that right below this circular image now. And as you know, we can only actually return one element here in this body property of our struct. So what we're going to do is put this image into a VStack. So I press Command on my keyboard, click on the image, and I'm going to embed this in a VStack. So in a vertical stack. Now let's add a button below. This is going to be a button. Let's call it Choose Profile Image. Let's add a closure right here so that we can do something after or when we're clicking this button. We need to specify a state for that in a second. But that's actually our UI. Let's maybe add a padding here at the bottom to add some more space between the profile image and the button. But this is our pretty basic user interface that we're going to be working with. Now, with this interface ready, we actually want to perform or display our ImagePicker controller, a view controller, once we press on the Choose Profile Image button. But the ImagePicker controller is not part of swiftui at the moment. So what we have to do is use this UIKit class, and therefore Apple presents us with a UIViewControllerRepresentable protocol that we can adopt. And therefore we have to specify a new class, or and also do that maybe in a new file. So I'm going to create a new file here. This is just going to be a Swift file. I'm going to call this ImagePicker and create that. And in this file, what we're going to need are two things, or two frameworks. First of all, we're going to use swiftui, and we're also going to import combine, since we need to use combine later to actually share the information that we get from the ImagePicker controller and load that into our swiftui view. And now to get started with our ImagePicker, let's define the ImagePicker class, and we're going to work with the class itself in a second. But before we do that, I'd like to create an extension for our ImagePicker and define a coordinator class. So let's just add this right here, coordinator. And this class is going to is going to inherit from NS object. And we're also going to use UI navigation controller delegate and UI image picker controller delegate. And if you've worked with the UI image picker controller class before, then you might know where this is leading us. We're going to actually add the necessary delegate functions of UI image picker controller delegate right here, and we need to use UI navigation controller delegate for the image picker controller to work properly. But this is something that we would have done with our view controller in UIKit. We would have adopted these protocols or these delegates here, and then assign that, or assign self as the image picker controller's delegate, for example. This is a possible approach. But what we have to do here now is actually deal with the events or with the delegate functions that we can use here. For example, image picker controller did cancel, which is triggered as soon as we press the cancel button in the image picker controller. And what we want to do here is use the picker and dismiss it with an animation without a completion handler. That's actually all we want to do here. And what we also have to do, and this is quite important now, is to use the function didFinish picking media with info, or the image picker controller didFinish picking media with info. And this is where we're actually getting the image our user chose from the image picker controller. And this image is hiding in this info dictionary. As you can see, we have a UI image picker controller info key and an any object right here that we have to deal with. So let's create an image object. Let's access the info dictionary, and let's use the UI image picker controller info key and the original image to actually get just the uncropped image selected by our user, and cast that to a UI image that we're going to deal with later. So here we're going to perform some code still so that we can work with our image in Combine and also send that to our swiftui view. But at the moment we just have this UI image, and we're going to use our picker and also call this miss, so this this is no longer visible after we've chosen an image. And now this coordinator is going to be very important in a second once we're dealing with the UIViewControllerRepresentable protocol. But before we do that, let me introduce you to how we're actually going to deal with the image picker. Because here we are going to use a singleton pattern to make sure that we always just have one instance of this image picker. So in our class itself, in line 13 at the moment, I'm going to define a static constant called shared, which is going to be of type image picker, and we're going to initialize that with image picker so that we always have just one instance of our image picker that we can work with. And we're also going to give that a private initializer, which isn't going to do anything. And we're going to define a view, which we still have to define. Let's do that. Yet another extension right at the bottom of our file. So let's create an extension right here. Call this, or for the image picker. And here we're going to define a struct, which is going to be called view. And this actually is where we're going to adopt the UIViewControllerRepresentable protocol. And in this extension, or in this struct, we're going to have to define some very important functions in a second. But let's maybe focus on our actual class here for a moment before we continue. So we're going to have a view here, which is going to be image picker, and our view, so we can initialize that right here. And we're going to have our coordinator, which is going to be the image picker, and our coordinator. We're going to need both. And now, to actually make our image available in SwiftUI, we're going to use the Combine framework. And this also means that we have to add some more capabilities to our class here, which is going to be in our observable object protocol, which is a type of object with a publisher that emits before the object has been changed, as the documentation tells us. And to actually use that, we're going to add a will change constant right here that is going to be a pass-through subject that gets an image for SwiftUI, and this actually is never going to fail. So this is how we define our pass-through subject. And now, to actually have an image, we're going to define that using a property wrapper here as published, and this is going to be our image, which is going to be optional, so I can assign nil here. But as soon as we set this image, we're going to check if our image is not equal to nil. And if that is the case, then we will use our pass-through subject and then send our image so that we can update our user interface in our SwiftUI view. And this is actually our class. And now we already have to find our coordinator that we're going to use in a second. And it's going to become clear what this coordinator does as soon as you see our implementation of the view. So let's scroll down a little bit more and maybe finish the implementation of our did finish picking with media info. And what we can do here now, before we dismiss the picker, we can use our image picker class and the shared object, and then access image and set this to, or initialize that with a UI image, and then just pass along the image. And as you can see, as soon as we initialize that or set this image property here, which we have in our class definition. As soon as we set that, our pass-through subject is going to send this image, and we're going to update our UI. We're going to see that in swiftui in a second, but now let's complete our extension of the image picker and the UIViewControllerRepresentable. And what I'm doing here actually applies to most UIKit views or another type of view controller that is only available in UIKit. You can always use this same approach. And to create a view controller, we actually need to implement the make UIViewController function right here. And as you can see, we get a lot of auto-completion here, and it automatically detected that we're interested in a UIViewControllerRepresentable context. The type is right, it's ImagePicker and it's view. And what we want to return as a view controller type here now is crucial, because what we want to return is a UI ImagePicker controller. And now we can define that controller and return it. So we have our ImagePicker controller, which we're going to initialize with UI ImagePicker controller. So this is pretty standard. And now we have to use that ImagePicker controller and set its delegate. And now we can't use self. That doesn't work. This is something that we might have done in UIKit when we're working with a standard view controller. Here we have to use our context and use the coordinator. And this is now where all of this comes in handy, and where all of this is getting really important, because this is where we actually receive the events from our ImagePicker controller, and this is how we set our delegate. Now, all I need to do is return my ImagePicker controller, and we're done. And we still get an error message here, and we cannot assign this type because we still need to make our coordinator. And also this is required by our UIViewControllerRepresentable protocol. So let me just quickly add the make coordinator function right here. And we need to return not void here, but a coordinator that we have already defined. So we're returning ImagePicker, shared, and coordinator. And with that, we have our coordinator ready to be sent as a delegate for our ImagePicker controller. And still, we are not conforming to the UIViewControllerRepresentable protocol, because there's still something missing, which is the update UIViewController function. Here, we actually don't need to add anything because we do not want to update that, but it is a required function. So this is a lot of preparation actually for some really cool stuff that we're going to do now in our Swift UI view. But of course, you can reuse that or these pieces of code for the ImagePicker controller again and again in all of your applications when you need to deal with choosing an image from the ImagePicker controller. And what we're going to do now is first of all define a way to actually receive our image or to store our image, and we're going to do that in a state property or state variable here right after our struct content view definition, and I'm going to just call that image. It's a type image, and this can be nil, so I'm defining this as optional. And since we're here, let's also define another state variable to actually display our image picker. So we're using showing image picker here, and set this to an initial false, that it's not displayed when we're launching our application. And by the way, if you're new to all of these property wrappers like state and environment object or observable object and so on, I've made a dedicated video on these. You'll find that in the video description below. Now, we have these two properties ready, and we can use the image to actually change our user interface depending on whether we have an image or not. If we don't have an image, we want to display this dummy avatar or person, and if we have an image, we actually want to display this image. So we can add a condition in our vstack right here using an if statement and check if our image is nil. If that is the case, I'd like to display just what we have already created. If not, I want to do pretty much the same, but not with this dummy image, but with the image we already have. So let's just use that image here. Also make that resizable, and we're doing actually just the same thing right here. And in any case, we just want to display our button. But what happens when we press our button? Well, we actually need to change the state of our showing ImagePicker property right here. So I'm using self showing ImagePicker, and I'm just going to toggle that. So we can set this to true or false. And to actually display our ImagePicker controller, we're now going to use a sheet as part of our VStack here, for example. So I'm just going to use my sheet here with is presented, and here the binding that we're using here is, of course, our showing ImagePicker. And if this is true, we're displaying the sheet. If it's false, we're not displaying the sheet. And now we can get pretty specific on which things happen. We could add an undismiss. This would, there you could do something. We return from our ImagePicker, then you could display the next screen. We don't need that at the moment, so we're just going to implement content right here. And the content of this sheet is going to be our ImagePicker. Since we have implemented it using a singleton pattern, we're using shared, and we're using our view. And this is going to be the content of our sheet. And on receive, so when we receive an image here, so from our ImagePicker, we're accessing our publisher, which is ImagePicker, shared, and our image. And once we have that, we can work with our image right here, add a closure, and here we can just work with our image that we received and set our image that we have in our view struct here in our content view to the image we received from the ImagePicker. Now let's press Command Option P to actually resume our canvas here on the right. And we should be able to press the play button right now and click on choose profile image. And here we go. We can choose something from our photo library. I'm going to go with this image, and here we are. Isn't that cool? We have implemented the ImagePicker controller, which is a UIKit class that is actually not available in swiftui, and we could just work with it as if we were using a view controller. It was quite a bit of work to actually get this done, since we needed to implement the UIViewControllerRepresentable and find a way to actually work with the ImagePicker controller delegate functions like did cancel or did finish picking media with info. But as soon as we got this info from our ImagePicker, we also had to actually use some combined magic to use a pass-through subject to actually transfer this image into our SwiftUI content view. It seems like a lot of work at the moment, but as I said, you can reuse this approach for different view controllers for different projects, and I hope you're going to find that useful. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel to not miss any future tutorials. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.